You ever had like one of those days where of the 15 people you probably speak to in a given day, about a dozen of them have something fairly biting to say? They're negative in some way, shape, or form. They're critical, but not like constructively critical, like, hey, it would be really great if you did X, Y, and Z, but just like straight up kind of mean. That's the day I had today. And I want to give you a little piece of advice that I was given today in terms of dealing with a day where 12 of the 15 people you communicate with generally make you feel like shit. Here it is. Here's the advice. Ready? Okay. There are going to be people in this world who don't like you. You are going to be a very juicy peach. You are going to be good on the tree. You are going to be healthy and firm and delicious and perfect and great, ideal even. But there's always going to be people, somebody somewhere, maybe a group of somebody somewhere, who just on a particular day aren't in the mood for peaches. Maybe they think peaches are too harsh. Maybe they think peaches are boring, or they're too soft, or they don't like fuzz, or I don't know. They're just not peach people. When that happens, when you encounter that, what you need to do is keep being a peach. Don't change. Don't suddenly try and be an apple, or a banana, or a kumquat, or a persimmon, or anything like that. You're a peach. Be a peach, and all those other people over there who are hating on your peachness because it's not apple-tastic, well, that's on them, not on you. That said, I also want to make clear there's an extra bit in the intro coming up in a few seconds. Just buckle up for that. All right? All right, let's get started, shall we? Here we go.
All right. Just remember what I've taught you.
What the fuck is that?
Hey, yo.
All right, here we go. A nice, delightful, delicious, happy intro. Wait, why am I not on screen? There I am. Hi, everybody. How are you? I hope you're doing well. I hope things are good with you. It's wonderful to be here. It's been a day. I don't know if you heard back when the stream was just starting. It's been a day. Kind of a good day. I mean, good things did happen. I don't want to say it's just a black hole everywhere, but by and large, it's not had its greatest moments all over the place. People have been critical. I have received some, let's put it mildly, feedback. And yeah, so let's just make a few things clear while it's just you and me talking, okay, before we get started today. Two things to tell you. First thing, I'm me. I'm always going to be me. I am too old and frankly too tired to try and jump through a lot of hoops to be something other than myself, just to try and make the content culture happy. I'm not interested in doing that. Here's what I want. I want you to be published. I want you and your work on my shelf, or back there on my shelf, or over here on the table on my Kindle. I want you to be published. I believe in you. I want you to believe in yourself. I will teach you everything I can. I will lay out every bit of sorcery, every bit of alchemy, every magic trick, every fast way, wrong way, right way, long way, all the way around the way. I'll teach you everything I can. I will dump my brain out for you into this microphone. I'll do all that. But if you still, at the end of the day, think that how I am, how I sound isn't your cup of tea, that's cool, because I'm not trying to be your cup of tea. I'm just trying to help you get published. We don't have to love each other. I'm not going to come around and be all, oh, golly, gee, everything's swell, because the world is on fire, and I'm not here to blow smoke up your ass. And I know there's a whole segment of the world who's going to clutch some pearls and fan themselves with the vapors because I sound like this. Hey, have you seen the world lately? I'm not here to lie to you. I want you to create art, and I'm going to help you create that art. And if we don't mix or mesh along the way, well, hey, that's cool. I'm still going to help people make art. I'm not changing. I'm not apologizing. This is who I am. So that's item number 1. Item number 2, right now, right this second, if you're watching this on YouTube or if you're listening to this on the podcast feed, right now you need to know that my first digital product is out. And you go over to payhip.com/John Helps You Write Better. You can go grab for yourself a nice draft checklist. Now, we're not going to mention that too much tonight, but some of the same stuff that's here is mentioned in there, and the two might really help you. But tonight I got something special for you. Now, a long time ago, if you dig deep into the bowels of the YouTube channel, right? You dig deep enough, you're going to find me talking about how to get published, the path to publishing, how to get from point A to point B. And I walked you through everything. It's one of the first things I ever streamed. There's like this map, and I don't even think I'm on camera. I think I'm just talking, and I'm having a panic attack while I'm describing to you everything. So not a lot has changed, but at least there's a camera now. But I want to go over that material again. I want to do better. I want to cover it for 2022. I want to talk about it and lay it all out. So I've identified tonight 6 things. 6 things? How many things? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 things. I'm sorry. No, 1, 2, 3, 6. I'm right. I can count 6 things. 6 things to walk you through each part of the publishing process. Now, this is going to apply if you are going to publish traditionally, or if you're going to self-publish, or anything in between. Some parts of this are going to apply slightly more depending on what you're doing. That'll be obvious when you listen to it. But by and large, this is aimed to help you, wherever you are in your publishing journey, help you get where you want to be. I'm going to ask you a favor, though, and this favor is important, so pay attention. I need you to promise me that even if if there's a section coming up that you've heard a million times, even if you swear up and down, oh, John, I've heard this. Oh, good grief. Enough with this already. I need you to promise me that you'll be open-minded. I need you to promise me that you'll hear me out. I need you to promise me that you'll give this a fair chance, even if you're well past this stage. Okay? For me. For a cup of tea. For the cats. For whatever you want to do it for that. Trust me, I'm going to walk you in the next 90 minutes. Yeah, I know, it's long. All my stuff's long. What are you going to do? If you're going to turn around and leave me comments about, oh, well, it should be shorter. Well, there are 2 ways to make my video shorter. 1, if you book an hour-long consultation with me, I'll give you all the same stuff. In an hour, it's faster and more detailed. Or 2, listen in sections? I don't know what to tell you. It's as long as it's going to be. I'm going to cover all this ground. I'm going to try not to go too quickly. I'm going to try to be detailed. I'm going to try to be honest. I'm going to try to be me. I'm going to try to get this all out. If the size of something intimidates you, that's okay. That's a thing. I don't mean to be combative. I don't mean to be aggressive, but it takes as long as it takes to get the information out, because I'm not exactly just talking about one thing here. We're going to cover lots of things. So take some notes, strap in, pour yourself a cup of tea, and here we go, okay? We're going to start at the beginning. We're going to start at the very beginningest beginning, okay? Now, a lot of you have probably already done this. A lot of you have been like, Oh, God, this is tiring. I don't care. We're starting at the beginning, and you'll see why in a second. Here we go. Step number 1, idea generation. I know. You're already in your draft. You've been drafting for I don't know how many months, days, weeks, years. I know. You know this part. You're going to swear up and down. You're going to tell me everything I'm going to tell you. Okay. Well, then this will be real quick for you, and you can go, I don't know, vacuum something while I'm talking. Idea generation is the most critical part of this process because the material you lay out here, the things you talk about, how you arrange them, the decisions you make right here, right now, make this step super straightforward and line you up for success 2 and 3 and 4 steps from now. If you skimp on this, if you blow through it because you're worried about it being too detailed, or you're worried about it being boring, or you're just bored by it, or you don't know how to frame it out, or there's just so many things you don't know what to do, or any number of things like that. If you just have a situation where you don't like this stage because it doesn't feel productive, because you can't turn and go, hey, look, I've got pages, I've produced something. I'm going to ask you, I'm going to challenge you, I'm going to push some buttons, I'm going to demand that you stay in this stage for a while. In this stage, you get out of here when you have organized 2 things. 2 things. Okay? Now, we're going to cover each of these in some detail, but remember, you can tailor these to your own needs as you like to. I'm not going to describe a specific format you have to adhere to. Just have these 2 things, please. Okay? So we're going to come up with an idea. The heart of our story, the thing our story is about. You need to be able to know what your story is about because people are going to ask you the minute you say, hey, I'm writing a book. Somebody somewhere is going to ask you, well, what's it about? You need to know. And you should know that even if we're just coming up with ideas. But there are 2 documents, 2 ideas, 2 structures, 2 pieces of tool, whatever you want to call them, 2 tools, pieces of tool, whatever. 2 tools that you can use in this stage. First one comes early. I've called it before. I've talked about it before. Called it a feel document. F-E-E-L. Feel document. A feel document is a document. It's a Word file. It's a note. It's a big steno pad. It's a legal pad. It's a it's a thing in Notion. I don't know. It's wherever you're aggregating your ideas. It's a big corral of ideas. And those ideas are everything you want in this book. Everything. Not just names, not just scenes, that counts, but also stuff like atmosphere and mood and setting and structure and cool moments you want. Oh, I want like a motorcycle chase away from a fireball, or oh, I want a dragon to be jumped like Evel Knievel or something. Or, I want the big climax of the movie to be a burglary or whatever. It's a complete list of everything cool and everything evocative and everything that's kind of rolling around in your head about this book. And it can take any form. It does not have a specific order. But what it is, it's a download. It's a download from your brain to the page. If you don't do this, if you skip this part, you're going to have a much harder time making decisions down the road with other steps, particularly drafting, which comes next. The function of a field document is to get the majority of the stuff out of your head and onto a page somewhere. Okay? Why do we need to do this? Well, as I just said, it's going to help you make decisions, but it's also going to help you get a sense of boundaries and framework. Because as you start shaping things and free associating and rambling and listing and whatever else you're doing, you're going to find stuff that doesn't necessarily fit. It started off in your head, it made sense in your head, but the minute you translated it down to the page, it doesn't really fit with everything else that's going on. But you wouldn't have known that until you put it on the page. Your field document can be any size. Page, multiple pages, a notebook, a Excel spreadsheet, thousands of things, billion, I don't know. It can be any size. Why is it really important? Boundaries, we talked about that. Helps with decision making. We'll talk about that in a second. But it also helps just sort of figure out what you still need to know, what you still need to figure out. It's sort of like when you look at a map and you roughly know where a few landmarks are, but not necessarily the road to take to get to them. But you know they're out there somewhere, there's this landmark, or we know out there there's somewhere there's this town, or we know the hotel is over here. We don't know how to get there yet. That's coming. But we know it exists. We can orient ourselves somewhat, a little, based on a field document. Now, how long should this take you? That's up to you. This might be something you can do in an afternoon. This might be something that you work on a piece at a time over a couple weeks. This might be something that you can, spend a whole weekend on, get it done. How do you know when you're done? Great question. You're done when you couldn't possibly squeeze one more thing out of your head onto the page. When it all ends up there, hey, guess what? You're done. Give yourself, some air horns. Until then, there's always more to get on there. It's important to know not everything in this field document is going to make its way into the manuscript. It doesn't have to. This is not only a list of manuscript stuff. It's just a whole big pile to draw on. Maybe it'll make it. Maybe it won't. You won't know until you put it in the field document first, okay? It's just a list. It doesn't have a particular format. If you want to do bullet points, do bullet points. If you want to do columns in a spreadsheet, do columns in a spreadsheet. If you want to do like a mind map spider web kind of thing, great. Whatever makes you happy, do that. Just get as many ideas at whatever level of detail they are, even if it's just, I want to name a guy Shinzo, or I want there to be, I want it to rain during the climax, or this story takes place between, September 1st and October 31st. Any detail. The church is haunted. The dog's name is Ruffles. Whatever. Any detail that could be in the story ends up in this feel document. Any of them. If you're out there and you're rolling your eyes, oh my God, John, you've covered this a million times, but you haven't done one, hey, guess what? I double dog dare you to do one right now in the middle of your drafting process. Take an afternoon. If it's so easy and so straightforward, you got no problem doing it, then do one. Go ahead. It's only going to help you. It's only going to make this easier. It's a tool in the toolbox. I do not understand why you'd want to not have as many tools as possible in your toolbox. That's the first tool at this step in the process. And believe me, you're going to be referencing this thing almost all the way through, actually probably entirely all the way through this process in some way, shape, or form. So the clearer you can be here, don't just say, it's a sci-fi story and stop there. Dig a little, push yourself, ask yourself more questions. Well, what kind of sci-fi story? Space epic, military sci-fi, hard sci-fi, soft sci-fi? What kind of sci-fi? Push. Don't just settle. Don't just, take the quick answer because you're frustrated or embarrassed or unsure. Dig a little. It's okay to take your time. There's no time limit. You're not losing. There's no race. Just take your time. Make this thing. You can do that. I've seen you make lists before. You got this. And that's the first tool. We're not done. There's another tool coming. Somewhere in the idea generation phase, as you're compiling this field document, your story and your brain are going to kind of work together to figure out what is and isn't in the story. And you might get a very loose sense of, okay, I know we're going to have this kind of character. I know we're going to have this kind of plot. I know we're going to have this. We're going to have that. If we're going to have a running example for all our steps, it's probably a good idea that we come up with that now. So let's suppose, let's suppose tonight our running example is a fantasy novel. Let's do a fantasy novel. We haven't really talked about fantasy novels in a while. So we're going to do a fantasy novel where, let's see. How about a fantasy novel with like kings and castles and dragons and swords and stuff? Let's do like a high fantasy epic. Great. So it's a high fantasy epic. How about a story where Upon the death of a king, a patriarch of a family, the death of the king, all the family members, the wives and sisters and brothers and grandchildren and nieces and nephews and uncles and all their attendants, all combat and battle and jockey for power to fill the vacuum left by the king. And let's suppose we have dragons in there, and let's suppose we have swords and castles, and it's this big generational fantasy epic. But like, we do it good, we do it really well because it's us. So, you know, like we make this big epic fantasy. Okay, that's going to be the story we're going to tell over the next couple steps. All these details, the king, and he dies, and he's got a brother and, you know, a wife and a daughter and grandkids, and these kids are named this and those kids are named that, and some people believe this and some people believe that. All those details, how many castles there are, how big the castle is, if there are dragons, what kind of dragons, what do they do with the dragons, you know, are there horses, why does no one own a cat, you know, all these things, every little detail, the big stuff, there's a king and shit, to the small stuff, no one has any cats, all goes on the field document. If you want to organize it, organize it. You don't have to, but just get it on that document, okay? Now, once we start doing that, we're going to start thinking about our story. And as we're thinking about our idea, refining it, polishing it. We're not trying to make it perfect. This isn't about perfect. Perfect we leave over there. We're just trying to make our thing, okay? So, while we're doing this, we're going to sort out what the story doesn't have. All right, well, this story doesn't really have any elves. Cool. The story doesn't have any dwarves. Delightful. The story doesn't have any lasers, spaceships. Fantastic. The story doesn't have any cell phones. Cool. The story doesn't have any big brand names. Great. Something like that. Figure out what it has and figure out what it doesn't have. It might help you to put what it doesn't have also on the field document. You might want to put a column and just do not have and then underline it a few times and then list. That might be helpful for you. You don't have to. If you can keep it straight that, hey, it's not a modern story, that's all you need. But by and large, get all those specific story details into that document. And then once you're going back through that document, making sure you got everything, figure out where we would start. Where would you start telling the story? Well, if the whole story is based on this idea that the king dies and everybody's trying to fill the power vacuum, it would make sense that we start our story with the king dying, right? We wouldn't want to spend, like 7 or 8 chapters of our book waiting for the king to die if the story doesn't really get going and we don't have to develop anything until the king dies first, right? We wouldn't want to waste our readers' time, so we're going to pick our loose first draft starting point based on what it is we're trying to say. And this moves us to our second, where's my camera? Oh, it's backwards. That explains a lot. Hang on. Flip. This explains our second tool, the outline. Yes. Hang on. Come here. You should outline. You need to outline. If you're not outlining, if you are outline averse, if you are anti-outline, first of all, if you're anti-outline, I don't know what to tell you, but all the authors, even the ones that are like weird, all the ones you like and respect, I guarantee you they've outlined. Outlining is what's going to help distinguish your work from this abstract, fly by the seat of your pants, make it up as you go, I'm not really giving a shit about rules, to something organized, publishable, and sellable. If you're trying to get up, where's my camera, up that level of quality, if you're trying to get to that point and that goal that you swear you have, you're going to outline. Because I guarantee you that if you're going to traditionally publish this especially, somebody somewhere is going to ask you for an outline. Now, I know. Somebody out there is saying to themselves, well, yeah, but I can write an outline after the fact. Yeah, you totally can. You absolutely can do that, and no one's going to know. Well, I mean, I'll know. We're making it up in this hypothetical world, but you can reverse engineer your outline. It's only partially noticeable by the editor assigned by the traditional publisher, but you can totally do that. That's fine, okay? But at some point, you're going to have to write one, so why not write one early and change it and let it grow and evolve as you go, rather than writing one that is sort of structurally sound after the fact. It's okay if you write it as you go. It's okay if you only, outline so far and then you write and then you outline some more and then you write. Again, it doesn't matter. What matters is the end result. What matters is that, hey, I wrote this book and I have an outline. So how you get there, that's up to you. You can do this. You organize your thoughts all the time. You just got to put them all in one spot. So we have our 2 tools for step 1. We have our field document that helped sort out what was and wasn't in the story. And it gave a bit of a framework and a genesis for the things we wanted. We want to have this cool dragon. We want to have this cool castle. We need to do this. We need to do that. Get that on there. And then from that field document, in addition to the other thoughts you're having, whatever they might be, however many there might be, there's no wrong number here. Just have some. Turn around and produce a first draft outline. It can be as long as it wants. It can be 1 page, 10 pages, 60 pages. It's up to you. It's okay. It also doesn't need to cover the entire book. In fact, it's probably to your advantage in the first draft that you just sort of first draft, you first draft the outline in addition to first drafting the manuscript. We're going to talk about drafts in a second. But you don't have to map the whole book now. I mean, you can. If it's that clear in your head, you absolutely can. That'd be great. Good for you. But at the same time, like if you need to think about it in chunks, just outline the chunk and then stop, write it, deal with it, set yourself up for success, and then move to the next and repeat. Deal with it, write it, outline it, so whatever you need to do. Work in chunks. Again, no one's going to know. No one's going to care. You're not going to lose cool points. You're not going to get in trouble with somebody. It's not like you're less good of a writer if you wrote your outline in 3 chunks as opposed to one big, giant, long thing. It's okay. What matters is that you have one. What matters is that you've done this. You're done the idea generation stage. You're done step 1 in our process. If you have A, a field document, B, an outline, and C, a rough idea of where to start the story. You can get all 3 of those, any 3 of those in any order you want, but you need all 3 to progress forward, okay? I want to take a second and thank our sort of sponsor again. Hang on. Remember, everything we're doing this month is sponsored by Sprecher Brewery. Sprecher Brewery, your home for artisanal and craft sodas that will knock your socks off. SprecherBrewery.com, home of the world's greatest root beer. Shipped directly to your door in all its delicious sweet made with honeyness, coming to you straight from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Sprecher Brewery, it kicks a lot of ass. Support them. Check them out. I think you'll like it. But now, let's go over and move on to that second step. Drafting. Oh, hey, look, I'm down here now. Step 2, drafting. You're probably here. The majority of people who listen to the podcast, you're here. Now, I'm not going to make a distinction between first draft, second draft, and third draft, or fourth draft, or fifth draft, or 25th draft in terms of like quality, because draft number does not match quality. Draft number just refers to how far along in the process you are. Why is my camera flipped back? Hang on a second. Flip. It doesn't matter. You're not a worse writer because you're stuck on the second draft when somebody over there is on like draft number 5. You're doing the best you can, right? You're working at whatever pace you're going. You'll be fine. Just keep going. Remember that we came out of our first step knowing where to start our story. Something to be said here. An important point. Hang on. An important point. This opening that you're about to write to open your first draft is not set in stone. You might decide, second draft, third draft, I don't know, at some other point, that you're opening in the wrong spot. How would you know? it's boring. You get lame feedback on it. It doesn't feel as exciting as the rest of the book. You think you could do a better job, something like that. You get a gut feeling, but you also get information telling you, hey, I think I could do a better opening. But you do need to open it somewhere, whether that's a scene, whether that's in media res, whether that's what I refer to as a traffic and weather report, and you just sort of break down the story and talk about some back stuff, or maybe it's a prologue, or maybe it's just a history lesson, or whatever. The story needs to start somewhere. And if you're in your first draft, nothing is really set in stone. Nothing's really firm. We're dealing with, let's call them chewy chocolate chip cookies. They're chocolate chip cookies, but they're chewy. We can bend them. We can play around with them. They're not firm and overly baked, right? We've got some pliability in that dough. Your first draft is much the same way. You can produce this to whatever degree, however you want, wherever you want. I'm going to slide this camera over just a skosh. So your first draft, if you're there, congratulations. Good for you. You are allowed to like this first draft. That's something I talked about over on the podcast. I believe it was last week. By the way, the podcast, John Helps You Write Better, is available everywhere you get podcasts. So feel free to check that out. I'm going to put a link to that podcast, You're Allowed to Like Your First Draft, down in the show notes, along with a link to the digital guide I mentioned in the intro. So your first draft. We're going to talk about it in terms of it being garbage, it being bad, it being a mess. We talk in all these negative terms about a first draft, but it is also very possible that you like your first draft. That's not bad. That's not wrong. It just is. You like it. Good for you. There have been first draft things I've written that I liked. There will be first draft things you'll write later that you like. There will be other first draft things you write that aren't good. It's a first draft. What's the goal in a first draft? To finish it. To see if the story has what are called legs in the professional vernacular. Just to see if you can get the whole story out. Does it need to be perfect? No. Does it need to be complete? Kinda. In the sense that you can roughly identify its beginning, middle, and end, and its climax and its resolution, and more or less have a rough sense of how the arc is progressing. Okay? It doesn't need to be perfect. It does not need to survive in 100% flawless intactness, preserved in amber all the way up through the publishing process. You just need to get it out of your head. And for a lot of people, this also means sort of detaching yourself from the rigors of word count. A lot of people say, oh, I'm writing sci-fi, I'm writing fantasy, I'm writing romance. So a romance novel is supposed to be this big, 80,000, 90,000 words, whatever, right? If you're writing your first draft, there's no magic ceiling on a first draft. Write it as long as you want. You want to write 500,000 words? Great. You'll be making some difficult decisions later. You'll be setting yourself up for possible frustration down the road. But while you're writing that first draft, just get it out of your head. Just get it out of your head. Include all those scenes where you're kind of sort of on the fence. Include all those scenes where you're like, I like it, I'm attached to it, but like I don't think it helps the story. Just get it out of your head. Just get it out of your head. Your goal here is to tell as complete a story as possible. Hit your plot, hit your character arc, get your themes across, do the rough basics of the story architecture. It doesn't need to be perfect. Just needs to be done. That's your first draft. And if you blow your word count and you're like way over 100,000, 200,000, 500,000, 900,000, it could happen. It could happen. Don't fault yourself for that. Just understand that transitioning from first to second draft is going to involve you culling some amount. And if you're way over word count, it's a big amount of words, stripping down and building a framework for your story so that it does fit the word count. Why does word count matter? If you're going to traditionally publish, word count is critical because word count directly affects the money you make. Here's how, if you haven't heard this already. So ink, the ink to print a book, costs money. Pages, the number of pieces of paper, cost money. And if you have a lot of words, that translates to a lot of ink and a lot of pages, you're making a big book. Big books are heavy. Heavy things cost more money to ship. high shipping costs and big books are statistically harder to market and tougher to sell to new people to make up for the expense of the ink and the pages. That's why we have word counts that more or less reflect, hey, we're trying to produce a book of about this particular size. This many words leads to roughly this many printed pages, so we can estimate roughly this amount of weight so we know more or less kind of sort of how much it's going to cost to ship physical copies. It's a budget issue. Now, it's for you, you don't have to worry so much about ink and page paper and paperweight cost because you're not publishing it traditionally. But in terms of delivering an expectation to the reader, you share this with self-publishing as well. Because if you're writing your first book and you slap that thing up on Amazon and the reader, scrolls Amazon and then all of a sudden finds out that it's, 5,000 pages, what impression are you going to make on that reader who's used to, 300 to 400 pages in an epic fantasy novel? What impression are you making? That's a point. That's something to consider, and we're considering it all the way back in the drafting stage. This is also where we can have that discussion about killing your darlings. There's a whole video about that on the channel. The emotional attachment you have to things is nice. It's great. But if it doesn't ultimately serve the plot or directly serve the character arc or directly serve theme, if you've already got 5 things doing those, 6, 7, and 8 can go. They're extra. And you might have written them really well. They might be really nice. And we can repurpose them for marketing. And we can repurpose them for other things. But for this story, for this second draft, turning the first draft into a second draft means, especially if you've blown your word count, here's your technical term, finding your book in the edit. This can be frustrating. This is something, it's going to happen. But I'd like to see you not have an aneurysm trying to get through it. So if you're finding you're way over, super way over word count, go ask for help. Come book an hour with me. We can figure out where to hatchet your book up real quick. But you're going to need help if you're way over word count. If you're only a little over word count, let's say you're aiming for 90,000 and you're at 95,000. You've got a little bit of wiggle room just in the nature of publishing itself, but that's going to be a more of a second to third draft or third draft pre-publication kind of thing. That's where you're going to get feedback from other people to really make those fine-tuned decisions. But you yourself, as you're writing, you can totally cut. I got to cut 40,000 words. I guess I'm losing that subplot about bagels. I guess you are too. Your second draft is where the book starts to really take shape. If you're finding that you're stuck in second drafting, you've been making the second draft for, a certain number of presidential terms or ice ages, or the last time you looked at a clock, it was a sundial, you've been doing the second draft for a while, you've got to ask yourself 2 questions. 1, why am I not done? 2, what is it I'm trying to do? And am I having an easy or hard time doing it? So if you're having trouble, really struggling, and you're just stuck in your second draft, chances are you're over tinkering with it. You are trying to make it something it's not meant to be. Your second draft is not perfect. It's not going to be perfect. Doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be, again, much like the first draft, complete. And it needs to be more, let's call it representative of the finished book. Okay? Doesn't need to be perfect. In theory, yes, you could take a well-made second draft and send it off to traditional publishing land and see what happens, and maybe you'll get lucky. It's very unlikely, but it is very possible. And self-publishing, one of the downsides of self-publishing is that anybody can slap any draft up there and call it a day. You could publish your second draft. Who knows? Maybe it'll hit. You won't know until you try, but that doesn't mean you have to rush out and do it. Your second draft is done when the book is really starting to feel most like a book, when it's more or less within the word count, when it's got your plot strengthened up, it's got your character arcs strengthened up, your themes are clear, and the writing is well organized. Not perfect. Remember, we're leaving perfect by the door, and all we're doing is shaping a pretty good, a really sound, a nice, workable draft going forward. Now, here's where we go to the third draft. The third draft is also referred to as your money draft. You could also lump this in with all subsequent drafts, but we're going to identify it as third. This is where the book takes on its closest to publishing persona, or it takes its final form. It makes its last Pokemon evolution. And in the theory, your third draft is more or less indistinguishable, barring traditional publishing nonsense or self-publishing panic. It takes its most like the finished product stance possible. To get there, between your second and your third draft, you're going to need feedback from other humans. You are going to need people to read this thing. We identify those people as beta readers. What's a beta reader? That's somebody who's going to read your book and give you their opinion. They're not called beta editors. They're not called beta critique partners. They're not called beta publishers. They're beta readers. Their job is to read, and then you're going to ask them some questions. What kind of questions? Well, ideally, you're going to put together like a pre-organized set of questions. You're going to think about what questions you want to ask. And you don't want questions like, was it good? Did you like it? Because the answers of, yeah, I liked it, help you in zero ways figure out what to write or what to keep or what to change in your book. They're going to like it or they're not going to like it. That's not really a question to ask. The question to ask is, what about this book did you like the most? What did you find the worst? Did you understand the character arc? What about the plot twist? You're going to ask questions about their understanding and their enjoyment, their understanding and their enjoyment of the book as they read it. You're going to take their feedback and you are going to transition into what is really the first sort of cycle of revising. But I'm going to caution you not to go overboard with this, because there's a whole other step coming next about revising and editing. But for now, we're just trying to do a little bit of fishing. We're just doing a little exploratory. What do you think? Give me some loose impressions. Give me a few notes. Give me a few ideas to think about going forward. Okay? This isn't like massive roll up your sleeves level rewriting surgery kind of a thing. We're just putting some feelers out. We're just trying to get a sense of things. And we're doing this between second and third draft, because when we hit that third draft, we are trying to get all our ducks in a row to go forward. And if we're going from third draft to fourth draft to fifth draft to 90th draft, same thing. We're always trying to get those ducks in a row. By the time we're done that third draft, we should be moving forward. If you want to finish and stop at second draft because you've been doing the second draft for, I don't know, an ice age, ask for some help. Go talk to a pro. Definitely get some feedback from beta readers, but also go solicit some help. If you've really been languishing in the drafting space, getting 5 people to tell you, oh, golly gee, I really think your plot twist is great, is not going to help you get over that hump that you're stuck with, whether it's writer's block or just imposter syndrome or panic or anxiety or just plain old, I don't know how to write the thing I want to write, whatever. Get help when possible. Drafting is going to take a while. How long? A while. Some people draft for a few months. Some people draft for a year. Some people draft for multiple years. There's no right answer. There's no magic answer that says, oh, drafting for X amount of time is ideal. Everybody's different. Everybody's writing at a different pace. They're writing on a different schedule. They're writing different amounts every time. Some people have life happen, so you have to, take 5 months off, 6 months off. Sometimes you're only writing 200 words here and there in little bits and pieces. It's okay. Again, this stage is done when the book, the manuscript, because it's not really a book yet if you really want to split hairs, when the manuscript is in its closest to publish or publishable state, and any extra tinkering you're doing is mostly cosmetic or superficial, and it's mostly induced by panic. Oh my God, do you think I should add an extra dragon? Do you think that would be cooler? Oh God, what if I got rid of one of the sons? What if I took this out? What if I changed this? In that kind of uncertainty, in that kind of I don't know-ness, that's where we start making panic decisions. I want you to avoid making panic decisions, okay? I want you to stop trying to make the thing perfect and just tell the story to the best of your ability, following your outline, following your field document, because now we're going to talk about going backwards too, making sure that the stuff in your field document made its way into the drafts. And when you, in that field document where you talked about maybe how the book should feel, I wanted it to be evocative. I wanted it to feel dangerous. I want my cyberpunk story to feel leathery and rainy. I want it to be like cooler than bad 80s movie Free Jack or something. Well, then you want to make sure the story's done that. And you're going to ask that to your beta readers. You're going to get a personal sense of that. And then you're going to move forward to step number 3. Oh boy. Revising and editing. Here's the other stage where people love to languish. Why? Because here's where we're really done. We're done making the story. We've covered all the bits and pieces. The story's out there. It's in the manuscript. It's in the file, whether that's a Word doc or Scrivener or Google Doc or whatever. It's all there. We're not adding any more pieces. We're just playing around with what we have. We're tightening, we're changing, we're shaping, we're rewriting, we're writing for the first time, we're filling in gaps, whatever. Let's make a distinction though so we're clear on our terms. Revising is transforming or altering the text for yourself. You revise. That's you, the writer, the author of the work, revises the work. You're going to change things. You're going to affect things. You're going to rewrite things. You're going to tinker with stuff. You're going to, take it apart, delete it, rewrite it, shape it, add more commas, take out the commas, put in a semicolon, add a character, take out a character, put in a scene. Any transformation of the text is a revision. How many revisions? How much revising should you do? That's up to you. Learning when you've gone too far, learning when enough is enough, not because you're trying to make the invisible future audience happy, but because you've reached that point where you're okay with it. That's the point to get to. I have done the best I can saying this way. Sure, I could say it 5 other ways. I like this way. I think this works. That's where you want to get to. That's the point to reach, okay? I understand that I'm pointing way off camera. The future audience is out there and they have a thing they want and we don't know them. I know. And that's way scary. We're not there yet. But at this stage, don't try and guess what they like to make them happy. Make you happy. It's also worth pointing out that at this stage, you might find out that you are really hard to please, that you are really picky, that you are really self-critical. I'm saying this as the president of one of the local chapters of self-criticalness. Welcome. We have hats. It's a thing. We can be really critical and really negative. Oh my God, I can't believe I wrote this. The sentence is garbage. And then you start letting self-doubt drive the car. And you start letting I'm not good enough be the guiding principle for your work. It no longer becomes about, I've got the story to tell and I can't wait to tell it. And it starts becoming, I have to make this thing perfect so that people love me, which is a different issue altogether. But that's revising. That's the stuff you do on your work. Editing is what somebody else does. Editing is what, shockingly, an editor does. Now, we've talked in multiple other places about the 3 kinds of editing: copy, line, and developmental. It is tricky to know when you need each kind of editing, so I will cover briefly when you need both or all 3 kinds of editing. Copy editing is the stuff that's going to put the nice whipped cream on your sundae, the nice bow on your package. It's going to make sure that the presentation of story elements and story statements, meaning the words you wrote and the punctuation you used, as well as just the basics of keeping your story organized. When you need that to be fine-tuned and pretty polished to a nice high shine, that's copy. Sending your thing out into the world, whether it's self-publishing or traditional publishing, your last stop should be a copy editor. Okay, that's where copy comes in. A line edit is sort of what I do when I do a chapter by chapter breakdown with a client, when I spend an hour with you just on a chapter and we work and figure out, okay, how do we say XYZ, whatever you've written, how do we say that best, clean up the punctuation, what are we trying to accomplish with it? Do we say this effectively? Does this make sense? Are those pronouns vague? When you're talking about this thing, is it clear? Does it put a picture in the reader's head? That's line editing. That's sort of the middle ground. You're going to go to a line editor usually when your third draft feels a little loose and disconnected, and you've got a rough idea, but you're just not sure that it's clear. It's mostly there, and you get to determine mostly on your own when I talk about this, but it's mostly there. It only would take a little bit of push, a little bit of effort, a little bit of somebody else coming along. And line editing will help tighten that up, shore up that line, make these things make sense. Developmental editing. Oh boy. Developmental editing is where you go, and it's that sort of like in case of emergency break glass, because developmental editing is where you take the story apart. Now, I'm not saying you delete the whole thing. I'm saying you start examining every component of it, who the characters are, what the character arcs are like, what the plot's like, what are the themes and how you're expressing them. What is each scene trying to accomplish? Why is this scene in the order that it is? It looks at every part of the text, including the punctuation, including the grammar, including your paragraph length, including your sentence complexity, all the things. Developmental editing is an incredibly thorough dissection, autopsy, scrubbing, maintenance, power washing, whatever you want to say, whatever you want to call it. Developmental editing is the most thorough way to produce the best story possible. It also takes the most time compared to the other kinds of editing, and I got to tell you, can get expensive. But a good developmental editor will turn you into a better writer, period. A bad developmental editor will make you doubt literally everything you do that's creative ever again until the end of time, because they will sow more seeds of doubt rather than seeds of surety. They'll make you question, oh my God, am I really doing this effectively? Well, what about this and what about that? Whereas someone else will come in and go, no, your character is fine, but let's just tighten this up and figure out where their arc is and where their arc isn't. A good editor, I don't care what kind of editing, but a good editor is there to help you and facilitate your producing the best work you can. They're not there to judge you. They're also not there to get real precious about spoilers. It's I don't know how else to describe this except to go outside of writing. If you brought your car to the mechanic, let's say, just the mechanic, because it was making a noise, and you roll up to the mechanic and the mechanic's like, okay, what's going on with the car? You don't want to turn to them and go, I can't tell you because otherwise it's a spoiler. Because the mechanic's not there for that. The mechanic is there to help your car not make that noise and help you get back on the road and go where you want to go and have a good car to do so. You can't spoiler warning the mechanic. Likewise, you should not give a shit about spoilers when it comes to your editor. They're not the reader. They're acting on behalf of the reader to facilitate the reader's experience with your book, but they're not reading it the same way the reader is reading it. They're not sitting back like, oh man, it's Wednesday night. I'm just going to sit here and kick it with this fantasy novel. No, they're here to help you make the best novel you can. They're here to help you be the best writer you can. They want to work with you. They're on your side. When you start getting all tight and panicky, oh my God, what about spoilers? Or, oh my God, they're going to steal my work. You're making it hard for them to do their job, and you're sort of revealing a misunderstanding of how these things operate. Don't do that. They're not going to steal your work. If you're really concerned that somebody out there is going to steal your work, why are you hanging out with them? Why are you talking to them? They're here to help. The other example I often give for this is like you go get your haircut. I need a haircut. Like I need a haircut badly. It's really bugging the shit out of me. I'm going to try and go tomorrow if I have, if I find a couple bucks in a jacket or something. You can't rock up to your salon, your stylist or your barber or whatever and go, hey, I'm not going to tell you how I want my hair because I don't want spoilers. I don't want to spoil it for you. But that's the person with the scissors. Like, it's their job to help you get the hair you want. They're going to apply their skill and talent to bring out the quality you're looking for. They're the last person concerned with spoilers. Same with an editor, okay? Revising is what you do, and you can do a fair amount of your own copy editing. I don't think you should. I don't think you should do your own line edits. I don't think you should do your own developmental edits. Because at some point, those processes aren't objective when you do them because it's your work. You know what you meant when you wrote that sentence with the vague pronoun in it. You know what you meant when you have like 5 he's in a scene. You know who's who. When you talked about this scene the way that you wrote it, when you produced that thing, you knew what you meant. You are emotionally compromised when it comes to your work. That editor, they're not you. They're looking at it with fresher eyes, detached eyes that you don't have. So that's why we make a distinction between revising and editing. Revising is your side of the street. I'm going to polish this so that it comes across the way I mean. Editing is where you take that and make sure it goes into the world and it makes sense. You need both. And yes, self-publishing people, you need an editor. Traditional publishing people, you need an editor too. Everybody needs an editor. I'll say that again. Come here, right into the camera. I don't care how you're publishing. You need this thing edited. Okay? Okay? Yes, I just nodded the camera. You need an editor because everybody's biased when it comes to their own work. The degree of bias is immaterial for our discussion right now, but get somebody who isn't you to help you make it the best it can be. Because even if you're traditionally publishing and you're swearing up and down, oh, no, when I submit this, they'll edit it. But the better shape the book is in when it goes down the traditional pipeline, the easier time that editor is going to have, the less likely they are to break out the real sharp tools and start changing shit, because you will have done that work already. When you move forward to the next steps, the manuscript should be in its best possible shape. This is why, for a lot of people, it often helps to put your money where your work is, pay somebody to help you develop the thing you want to develop to the degree you want to develop it. For a lot of people, that's kind of a threshold. You'll watch a lot of writers fizzle out at this stage. They'll stay revising. They won't transition to editing. They won't ask for help. They won't go seek a professional because it costs money. And that means all of a sudden this effort they've been doing feels more real, more risky, and more dangerous, more, nearer to judgment. And they're not really down for that. They like the abstract idea of being a writer. What I'm challenging you to do, what I'm pushing you to do is say, no, I want to do this. I want to be published. I want to produce my stuff. I want my book on a shelf. Well, this is how we get there. We're going to cross the Rubicon in terms of like, I'm making my own revisions. Here comes an editor to come give me that last polish to help equip me best to go forward. And that's step 3. By the time step 3 is done, we have a publishable book. However, we're going to publish it, that's a different story. We're going to talk about that in the next step. Step 4-ish, querying. Because this step primarily is going to talk to the traditional people out there, people looking to traditionally publish. You'll query. But don't worry, self-publishing people, you're in this step 2. Kinda. We're just not calling it querying when you guys do it. Okay? But let's talk about querying for a minute. There's several videos on the channel about querying, but let's just do a real quick kind of package deal on it. You've got about 250 to 300 words to talk about your work in a way, much like a movie trailer leads up to a movie, to suggest the potential of someone in traditional publishing saying yes and giving you money and buying this book from you and turning the manuscript into a book. The query has 3 fundamental sections. The first 2 are talking about the book in terms of it being a story. You're going to introduce some characters, some conflict, some stakes. But that 3rd section, the last third of a query letter, you're going to talk about your story as a product. Your story becomes a book. You talk about it in terms of its title, its word count, its genre, and its themes. and you talk about yourself as an author as well. Again, I've covered this in more detail elsewhere on the channel for sure. But the query is that sort of transitional moment as we stop talking about it just as a story and start bringing in book-based, product-based, saleable-based things. This is a stage that's really tough for people because especially if you've been spending a whole lot of time like in the drafting stage, it's going to be real hard for you to flip that switch and suddenly start thinking about your book as a product. This is also another stage, much like editing and revising, where a lot of writers stop. They give up. And they give up for a very simple reason. In the querying stage, this is your first time you really meet rejection. People don't like rejection. I don't blame you. Nobody likes being rejected. Nobody likes hearing no. Nobody likes hearing negative things. Hell, at the beginning of this, so what was that, like an hour and change ago? Exactly 58 minutes ago, I talked about the negative shit I had today. Like, okay, it's hard to hear hard stuff. But querying for traditional publishing is sort of the last remaining hoop to leap through. Is it really important? Does it really matter? Yes. Not just because it satisfies the conditions of traditional publishing, but your ability to talk about your work as a finished, sellable product speaks to the same thing that we're going to talk about in a second with self-publishing, your ability to start to sell your work. Your query letter, in addition to being like the thing you have to do for traditional publishing, your query letter is your first marketing tool. Here's a little note. We're going to go all the way back to that first step. Remember the field document? Remember how we wanted to include elements about how the story should vibe and how we wanted to get the story across and all the cool stuff you wanted in there? You can bring that up in the query letter. You don't have to say, this is from the field document, because that's weird. But if you want to like call your story a neat futuristic gangland romp and neat and futuristic were on your field document, use it. Querying is a skill. Your first query letters will probably be not great. We all know this, and yet somehow we still make query letters. Everybody has trouble with their first couple query letters. That's just the nature of this business. It gets better. You can practice. I'm going to tell you a few points about querying that I've said elsewhere, but I just want on the record here, okay? 1, if your query letter is real bad, like awful, your manuscript isn't even read, like at all. They'll just go, if the query letter is this bad, the manuscript must be that bad. The badness is the same. I won't even bother reading it, reject it, move on. Okay? So if you're getting a lot of rejections, you cannot assume they've read the manuscript. They've looked at the query, made a judgment based on the query alone, and given you a response. This means when you face that rejection, when you get rejected, don't go diving into the manuscript and start changing it, because it might just be a bad query letter that's at fault here, a fixable thing. You just come up with the query as a whole, a new query. Also, it's worth noting, you should always write a new query. If you're sending a query letter out, write a new query. It will help you get better at it. Important here, too, is that you don't have to cover everything. I'm not saying spoilers, but if you have, remember our generational, epic fantasy with huge families and debates and fights and arguments about who's going to rule and how and the role the dragons play in castles and all that stuff, you can't possibly mention all of that in the book. Not by name, not specifically, but you can mention some of it. You can keep it broad like I did when I first introduced the idea. After the death of a patriarchal king, the other family members, his wife, his children, his grandchildren, their lovers, their attendants, and everyone in between all vie for power to fill the vacuum. I didn't sit there and name all the kids by name. I didn't tell you that, oh, this one has a sword and that one has a bear or something. Because a query letter is not a summary. A query letter is a marketing tool. It's a movie trailer, but for a book. That's different, by the way, than a book trailer. Book trailers are generally masturbatory devices that authors create to feel better about things. Like, isn't it cool and neat that I did this? But I, in 25 plus years, have never seen a book trailer be a thing that sells somebody on buying the book. They're nice. They're fun in the same way that, like, you know, a funny TikTok meme is fun. It ultimately doesn't have a lot of utility in the long term, but it's nice. But querying is an art, querying is a skill, and you can get better at it. Practice. Again, before we bring in the self-publishing people, you're going to face rejection with this. It's going to be hard. This is a job, remember? We didn't just write for, shits and giggles. If we did, we wouldn't have made it past step 2. This is a job. This is one of the ways we, make entree into the job. It's hard. You're going to face some rejection. And I know there's a lot of classism, ableism, racism, and sexism baked into the idea of get thicker skin. I know it's a shitty phrase and it's unclear as hell. So let me tell you this instead. You have to understand that what they're rejecting is not you as a being. It has nothing to do with your humanity, your identity, your quality of life, the place you live, how you grew up, how you sound, what you do, all that. It has only to do with the information in front of them. It's an email, there's a query, there's some text. That's what they're making a decision on. Yes, in part, sometimes, maybe, somebody's jumping on Google or skimming social media to roughly get a vibe of things. But by and large, they don't know you. They're not interested in this moment in knowing you. They're not going to understand or really care that you wrote this in 11 drafts or that you wrote this in 10 minutes. Hang on. There's a comment. I'll push back on book trailers a tiny bit if that's totally fine. Absolutely. I want you to push back. I bought KJ Harowick's Bloodflower in large part because it had a really cool book trailer. That's great. That's great. I'm really glad that you got a book that I hope you really dug it. In large part because you had a really cool book trailer. Fantastic. That is like the first time I've ever really heard a book trailer doing its job. I think in terms of it being a reader-facing thing, it's more effective than it being a publisher-facing thing. But yeah, they can be, when done well, and I got to say, that takes some craft. A trailer can be effective just like a movie trailer can. But don't go out of your way to think that you need it. But yeah, I'm really glad that's great. Thank you for pushing back. I saw it build a lot of hype, and maybe that was the algorithm. Yeah, it's very possible that was algorithmic. I don't know. I don't think I've seen that trailer. I'm not familiar with the book either. But hey, if this thing somebody produced made you get the book, then it did its job. So I hope you enjoyed the book. Good job. All right, mouthful of tea. Then we're gonna bring in the self-publishing people for the querying step. All right. I want to point out, I know if you're looking at your little counter on your podcast, or if you're me and you're looking on the counter on the video, I'm moving quick. I know it's because part of the stuff that's rattling around in my head right now is everybody told me I was taking too damn long. So this is me moving at pace. I hope I'm covering some good ground. If you have questions, write me an email or find me on, where's the Twitter? It's down in that bottom corner. Let me know and I'll happily answer to the best of my ability. All right. One more mouthful. Tonight's tea, by the way, is watermelon. It's goddamn delicious. I got it from Tea Forte. It's amazing. I've had it for a while. It was one of the summer specials, and I'm just I think I still have 3 or 4 bags left. It's cold pour over. It's real good. It's also real strong. I can feel my eyebrows. But it's delicious. It's watermelon-y good. All right. Back to querying. Now we're going to bring the self-publishing people into this discussion. Because you're not going to necessarily write a query letter with the intent of distributing it to a publisher, because you're going to self-publish. But you're going to produce a query letter because I want you to learn how to talk about your book as a product. So you're going to query your reader. Except, here's the thing, rather than make 3 distinct thirds in your query letter, because in a traditional query letter, there's somewhat of a division here. The first 2 thirds talk about the book as a story. Third one's a product. A query letter for a self-published book comes across more as an even blend. You know those TikTok cooking videos or those Instagram cooking videos where somebody fills like a pan with batter and they take the back of a spoon and they start making like swirls and designs and stuff? That's what we're going for here. We're going to whip and blend and fold these things together to make kind of an intricate little lacy pattern. So you're going to talk about it as a book as much as you're going to talk about it as a story. This, for self-publishing, is going to be the basis of your sales copy when it comes to sell your book. See how we tie that together? Again, we're going to go all the way back and reference our field document to help keep us on track, because that field document all the way through our process has been giving us a layer of consistency so that our vibe is good, so that we've, been talking about the same things all the way. But a note, one of the things we really want to avoid is crutching on the same phrase, always using the same language, because what that reveals, if you keep using, an epic tale of dragons and swords, something like that, right? Like a real generic phrase, and you use it everywhere, it's going to come across like you don't entirely know any other phrase. So you only got that one and you use it a billion times. I'd like to get you away from always leaning on one thing. It happens. It's human nature. I do it all the time. But be practiced in the ability to draw on multiple different things in multiple different ways. So we're not just going to call this an epic samba of winged fire-breathing creatures. We're not just going to call this a story about a family who sits on a pointy metal sword chair. We're going to call this a harrowing tale of family torn apart. See? So we're not necessarily always grabbing the same three adjectives or the same single emotional concept. We're picking and choosing, partially from our field document, partially just from our experience in writing, partially just from us making it up as we go. The querying stage for traditional publishing is done when you send the query out. Some people will argue that the querying stage is done when your query is accepted, and that's fine. First of all, before we move forward, let's talk about who we're querying. 90-something% of the time, you are querying an agent. We've talked about agents before. I'm going to talk about them again. An agent, if you don't know what an agent is, let's assume for a minute, you don't know what an agent is. An agent is a person, an intermediary, a middle person who is going to, on your behalf, sell your work or facilitate the sale of your work to a publisher. And then when you receive a sum of money for the sale of your book, they're going to take a percentage of that sale. Now, they didn't do as much work as you did, so they're not taking the whole pile of money from you, but they're going to take a portion because they, made some phone calls and wrote some emails. But they're going to take a portion. But their job is to facilitate the sale of your work to a large publisher who really just wants the book. So, but that's an agent. The majority of queries go to agents. Some queries go straight to submissions editors in what are called unagented submissions. That's a submission without an agent, where you're going straight to the publisher and saying, hey, here's my book. Those companies, generally, not just companies, publishers, printers, stuff like that, that tends to be a bit more Wild West, because there hasn't been an intermediary in between. We haven't gone to a middle person. You are going to, and I've worked with a number of publishers. I've started a number of publishers that took unagented submissions because it's cheaper in the long run. We don't have to worry about, an agent will leverage up or argue up for more expensive things because that's where they get their payment from. But if you go unagented, it's still money, but you don't have to worry about like a lot of money, because then we won't have to also pay the agent. But it's the Wild West, because if I don't have to query an agent, that's one less amount of rejection, because I can just go straight to the publisher. Because if the publisher says yes, then I'm in and I'm done. no need for an agent. However, there's still that risk of rejection. And as a publisher, as a submissions editor who has gone through many an inbox to sort out many a thing, people think they're really shortcutting the system or skipping ahead in the line by going straight to the publisher. And you get a lot of work that didn't go through the previous steps we've talked about for the last hour. You see a lot of stuff that's just kind of like, I wrote a book and it's stuff, and here you go. Not the best look. Not the best approach. Some of it's okay. Some of it can be very good. Others, not so much. Others can be a mess. Others can be like, it is not uncommon, I'll tell you this, it is not uncommon in unagented submissions to receive an awful lot of submissions that wouldn't otherwise be possible. You'll get a lot of very distasteful, very controversial at best, aggressively toxic at worst. You'll see a lot of really bad stuff. And you can interpret bad however you want, whether we're talking about poorly crafted or just containing material that just, yeah, you'll see it. It's out there. Querying, though, is a useful tool because you should be able to talk about your work as more than just, well, I wrote this story and here's what happens in it. You should be able to talk about it in terms of a book and the themes and how it connects and how it relates to people and what you're trying to say and why you're trying to say it. And you should be able to talk about your stuff as more than just the contents or series of events that happened to made up people. Okay? For self-publishing, don't dismiss this step. I know a lot of people jump to self-publishing because they want to skip this querying process, but don't underlook or don't undervalue that learning how to query and learning how to talk about your work has benefits for you down the road. But that's step 4-ish. What's next? Step 4, this is actual step 4. Step 4, publishing. So now we're going to publish. Here, where in the querying part, you know how we sort of leaned a little bit more on traditional publishing? Now we're going to lean a little bit more on self-publishing because there's a few more bells and whistles here for the self-publishing crowd. These things still happen in the traditional publishing crowd, only they're not going to be handled by you. So let's be clear what we're talking about. This step starts when someone says yes to your book, at least in traditional publishing. So this is somebody saying, yeah, we want it. We want this. Congratulations, we're signing you. Here's some money. Here's a contract. Here's a schedule when you'll get more money. Here's what we expect of you in terms of sales. Here's some dates to know. Here's some paperwork to sign. Your book is ours now, and here are the terms for us owning it. Enjoy. Oh, P.S. You'll probably have to, sell a certain amount in order to stay in our good graces. That's a different story for a different day. But by and large, publishing starts when the book is ready to be published. Now, I'm going to talk about the next steps, and then we're going to split off to either say who's covering them, who's going to pay for them, who's going to do them. The next steps in the order is pretty variable, but they all have to happen. The next steps are, 1, the thing gets edited. I know. You're going to tell me, but John, one of the earlier steps was editing and revision. I know. But if that earlier step was revision, this is where the editor comes in. If you already had the editor, great. Then it doesn't necessarily have to happen here, aside from maybe a copy edit just to kind of put the last bit of polish on it. But editing happens. And in traditional publishing, that edit can be rigorous. It can be the rigorous edit you should have had way back 2 or 3 steps ago, but now it happens here. And this can lead to a cycle of revision and editing back and forth that it might be, sort of a Groundhog Day effect where we're going through the same motions we went through before, only now somehow it's new people. And a lot of authors talk about how, well, it counts now because it's a publisher doing it. It counted back then too. It's all editing. Hopefully it's not, savagery. It's not just people tearing apart the book for the sake of, shaping it the way they want to market it. That is a thing that happens. It's not the norm, but I've seen it happen. I've seen books get edited and the publisher has a particular view in mind of it, and the editing is then done to tailor the book to that view. It happens. That doesn't mean you should expect it. That doesn't mean like, oh, go into traditional publishing if that's what you want. Just I'm telling you, be aware of it. But by and large, here we are with editing. Now, in traditional publishing, the publisher foots that bill. They have an editor in-house, or they bring somebody in, and then they edit. Same thing we talked about with the editing and revising step before. Only now it's getting done over here. If you're self-publishing, you're paying. Because in self-publishing, you, the self, you're the publisher. So you're paying for an editor if you haven't already. Ideally, the edit back then was thorough and good, and you were able to do all those things. So this is really just a copy edit, substantially less expensive, and mostly there just to put, a nice pretty bow on things and straighten up all the commas and clean up the manuscript and get it going. It's pretty straightforward. Now, how long does that take? Well, in traditional publishing, it can take some amount of time. Sometimes it's a month. Sometimes it's 45 days, 60 days, 90 days, 120 days. It's really variable. What makes it variable in traditional publishing? The number of other books also simultaneously getting edited, the number of editors available, the amount of work each edit is, because remember, not every book is the same. You might have a book, your epic fantasy about the destroyed family with the dead king might need very minimal editing, just some touches, a little bit here and a little bit there, and can we clean up this scene and can we take this thing out? Whereas somebody else's story about, in a sci-fi setting, a story of spies and rebellion might need a different amount of editing. Or perhaps you're writing a superhero story where everybody on the internet's really mad. So maybe that needs like tremendous editing, and then people are still going to complain about it on the internet. But every book's different. Every amount of editing is different. Every edit is individually different. Every editor is individually different, but that happens at this stage. Now, in traditional publishing, and sometimes in self-publishing, this is also the moment where the cover starts. The discussions about the cover and the title begin here. Sometimes that's been handled in advance. Like we started those discussions way back in the submissions process, or in the early, we finished up our third draft and we were ready to self-publish. But if it hasn't, the most common time to see that is here. And that's finding a cover designer, coming up with some loose ideas and sketches, figuring out the typography for your title, and shaping the overall cover for the book, be it a physical product or a digital product. Again, in traditional publishing, that's paid for by the publisher. In self-publishing, guess who's paying for it? That'd be you, the self. How much is that going to run? Assume several $100s at a minimum. It's not uncommon to run several $100s up to $1,000 or more, depending on who's doing the art, what kind of detail it is, how quickly you need it, et cetera, loads of different factors. But yeah, you're going to need a cover, whether that's self-publishing or not. You need a cover, and it's going to need to be of a certain dimension, depending on how it is you're going to publish it. Some physical copies need to be a certain size, some hardcovers need to be a certain size, whereas some digital productions need to be certain sizes so that you can have thumbnails or so that you can have images on Amazon, that kind of thing. So you're going to need those things produced. How long will that take? Roughly about the same amount of time as an edit, anywhere between 3 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 10 weeks, couple months. Every artist is different. Lots of different factors go into that. This is the sort of thing that you talk about with him. I can't speak to it specifically. I am not an artist. I can make a couple slides, as you see here, but by and large, I'm not a cover person. I struggle to do thumbnails. If you've ever looked at my channel, I'm working on it. I'm in a class right now, in fact, to help me work on thumbnails and stuff. But I'm not an artist. So it takes time. You generally, especially if you're self-publishing, this is important, you generally want to start the cover process early because it takes time. One of the nice things about self-publishing is that you're not really bound to the traditional publishing book schedule. The traditional publishing book schedule turns several times of year into very critical things. Usually that's February at the beginning of the year, then June or July, and then November, either for release. The later you want your book out, the earlier you want your book submitted. And the later your submission, the further down the calendar you're going. If you, let's say today is what? Today is October I'm dating myself and I know I shouldn't, but this is, let's say, near the end of October. In the end of October, if you were to submit a book today, if you found somebody with an open submission window, we'll talk about that in a second. A submission window is just an amount of time where publishers or agents are accepting possible submissions. If you were to submit a book today and they said yes, I would not expect to see that on a finished product shelf or a finished product book announcement. Probably the end of next year. It certainly wouldn't be this coming winter. It probably wouldn't be next fall. It would be at least a year. At least. I think 15 to 18 months is at least more likely, because traditional publishing schedules are in 2-year shifts, and a lot of that stuff's already been planned out. Again, there's just a volume of time and traffic. Publishing at this stage for self-publishing is pretty liberated from that. You could slap that sucker up on the internet anytime you want, as long as you comply with all the rules of whatever it is or wherever it is you're publishing. If you just want to turn your stuff into a PDF and sell it on your own website, you are more than welcome to. I would strongly advise, however, if that's what you're going to do, you go talk to a book layout person or a layout designer who can, not just right-click, save your file as a PDF in Word or something, but somebody who can actually help you format the book for optimal readability and sales. And arm that with your cover, and you can really package together a nice finished product. This stage is done when the cover's done, the editing's done, and the manuscript is ready for printing if you're going for printing, or it's ready to be, take pre-orders if you're going digital, or it's ready to sell straight. Which leads us to the 5th step, which, by the way, is our last step. Marketing. Oh boy, marketing. Now, let's be real clear here. You could argue that this step should have started way back in step 2. The minute you started drafting, I've had this discussion with people. The minute you start drafting, you have an opportunity to start marketing. However, the marketing done earlier when the book isn't entirely finished is different than the marketing you do when you intend to sell. Why is that? Well, when the book's not done, you can't talk about the book as a finished thing. You can't talk about the book in its entirety. You can just sort of build hype about what's coming and what's going on. Oh, I'm writing a story and it's got a family and a king and there's a dragon and this, that, and the other. It's really cool. And you can get people on board, and your updates are sort of procedurally generated. Oh, I wrote chapter 6 today, you guys. It's a real banger. Versus sort of finished product marketing with, this book comes out in 3 weeks, sign up now, get, exclusive extras, here's a discount, other ways we can pack it and sell it. Marketing, though, is not, let's be real clear, hang on. Marketing is not something to wait until the last minute to do. So if you're out there right now and you're still writing your book, there is some marketing you can do, except it's not going to necessarily be about the book when it's finished. Like if you're still making your second draft, don't start pre-order sales. But you can start gathering email addresses so that when the book comes out, you can sell it to them. But in the interim, so that you're not just cold emailing somebody 2 years from now, you can use their email addresses in a newsletter to keep them abreast of the product, the progress you're making on the product you're writing. So there's always some bit of marketing. There's always some bit of fuel to keep that fire burning. Sometimes it's just tweeting about, wrote 5,000 words today, wrote 10 words today. It was a real fucking slog. Oh my God, I can't believe it. Other times it's, ready to move to the next step. Sent my book to the editor, got my cover. There's always something that you can do to market either yourself as a producer of art, as an artist, or something specific in your art to sell or intrigue or connect with. Remember, the goal here is always connection, especially in chapter 5, but entirely throughout the whole writing, producing process. We've been trying to connect with other people. We've taken this idea we've had of made up people and unreality. We've taken this unreality and we're using it as a lens to view or say something about our reality that other people can interpret and pick up. So we're talking about this power vacuum in this high fantasy dead king kingdom with dragons, right? That's our unreality. But what we're saying, what we're really talking about as we have all this like backstabbing and intrigue, what we're talking about is family dynamics, or we're talking about blood feuds and disagreements or misunderstandings or, corruption. Those are real world things we are lensing through our unreal text. Does that make sense? Do you understand what I'm saying? That's all we're ever trying to do is just connect to somebody else, whomever they might be, connect to them through the medium of our made up story with our made up people. Because otherwise it's just you and me talking. Hey, here's how I feel about topic X. That's my opinion. You get to receive that opinion and do whatever. But somehow, some way, if we bring it through the lens of a story, all of a sudden it becomes a bit more artistic, a bit more chewy, a bit more diverse, a bit more full, a bit more imaginative. It's still my opinion. It's still my view. Only now, instead of me like clubbing you over the head about how shitty capitalism is and how content culture will kill us all and how the last thing you need to do is compare yourself to somebody else's success, now I'm going to frame that or I'm going to frame it through made up people and dragons. Oh, makes sense? Everybody with me so far? So far, so good? Great. How much marketing is too much? It is possible to do too much, to just blow up somebody's social media feed with essentially nothingness. Too many short updates done too quickly that illustrate too little progress is wasted time and space. You want to update consistently. Consistency, just like consistency in drafting really helped us write on an effective timeline, consistency in marketing, consistency in frequency of marketing updates help us sort of codify and maintain our audience. Because if you just keep telling everybody, hey, I wrote a book, 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 eventually they're going to go, yeah, we get it. And they're going to dip out, and we don't want them to go. But if you tell them very infrequently, like super infrequently, it's very possible that a large number of these people will go, why am I on this newsletter? What's going on? Oh, write a book. Yeah, I'm not really invested in this process. I'm out. So learning your own scheduling, learning your own best time to do that comes down to how you make decisions. Remember, writing is the act of making decisions. Marketing is part of that. So make those decisions. I'm going to, for me, every Monday, everybody on my email list gets a newsletter. Every Monday, depending on what tier on Patreon you're on, Patreon, it's right above me, patreon.com/John Helps You Write Better. Depending on your Patreon tier, you might also get a second newsletter with extra stuff in it. Every Tuesday on Patreon, right up there, certain tiers get releases, and then every Friday, everybody gets a release. Consistency in schedule allows for a community to develop and allows for readers to grow and appreciate work and allows for a fan base to develop and allows for a supportive network for the writer. Marketing is an asset. It is a pain in the ass. It sucks. It's tedious. It's frustrating, but it's critical. And it's okay to be not good at it all the time. It's okay to be a little behind in your newsletter. It's okay to mess that up. It's okay to say a thing, piss a few people off, and then apologize to them or backtrack or realize 2 days later, oh shit, I could have said that differently. Or realize after you've written the whole thing out that, oh, I forgot this other huge major part. Fine, do it again later. Marketing, just like drafting, does not have to be perfect in order to be effective. The goal in marketing is connecting to the other person and saying, hey, I have this thing either here or it's coming or I'm working on it or whatever. I'd like you to be excited. I'd like you to be interested. Do you want more information? And whether that information is, hey, do you want a copy or do you want to hear me just talk about it some more? Marketing matters. Once your book is published, and whether we're published traditionally or whether we're published on our own with self-publishing, you will have to market. You will have to market. The heady days of, oh, well, the publisher handles that are gone. They're just gone. That's not how this works anymore. You're going to do the marketing. You're going to do about 85 to 90% of the marketing in traditional publishing, and you're going to do 100% of the marketing in self-publishing. Marketing. And maybe that's social media. Maybe that's YouTube. Maybe that's TikTok. Maybe that's Instagram. Maybe that's, I don't know, whatever the next thing the kids are on to. Do you have to do all of it? Do you have to be on every platform? No. No, you really don't. But you do have to be on a few. You do have to use at least two. You do want to use it for outreach and growth and congregating ideas and people. But you have to find out what works. There are other videos on this channel that go into this in more detail for sure. But by and large, marketing is what you do to help people become aware or remain aware of the progress you're making on a thing or the possibility of buying a thing that you've made. And you are going to be doing that for every book you produce between now and the end of your writing career. There will always be marketing to do. And there will always be days where you're kicking ass at it and always be days where you feel like you're struggling. This is made more complicated by the algorithm because so many people want to be like, I figured out the algorithm. You didn't. Nobody did. Nobody does. It's not designed to be figured out. It's not the Enigma machine. We're not winning World War II. It's just the way machines process and distribute information. It's a program. And we don't need to understand it 1,000 million % in order to get people informed. And we don't need to try and appease it in order to curry favor because it has no favor. It's just a program. Don't overthink the algorithm. Yes, there are things like keywords and SEO and all these different terms that can really play a part in the visibility or discoverability of your work to people who aren't already informed about it. But you can do more than rely on a few pieces of code or a program to do that discoverability by doing some marketing yourself. Again, this is a deep-ass topic that's got too many parts. I've covered some of them elsewhere. I will continue to cover more of them elsewhere as well, but that's marketing in a nutshell. There are loads of different ways and loads of different potential things you could do. Find a few, get good at them, keep going forward. Okay. Let me check my little clock here to see how we're doing. Oh, we're doing great. Okay. Are there questions, issues, etc.? Otherwise, we will get out of here tonight. I know there's a ton of information here. I know, an absolute ton. I know. And it's going to be a lot to think about and a lot to detail. I know. Believe me, I could have done another hour on this easy. And at the initial rehearsal today, this thing was 3.5 hours. Thank God we got it under, like, it's just a little over 90 minutes, although somebody somewhere is still going to tell me it's too long. We're working on it, though, okay? Any other issues, comments, etc.? Else we will go straight to the outro. All right. Let's go to the outro. I want to thank everybody for checking this out. This one was designed to be one single place I could point you to explain different steps in the process. I tried to make this fairly comprehensive. I also tried to make it enjoyable. I hope you got something out of it. If you did, please let me know. If you liked stuff like this, if you enjoyed things like this, the two best things you can do are, one, jump over to patreon.com/John Helps You Write Better and let me know. Your support keeps all this stuff working and going, and I, of course, appreciate every single person. And tiers have many benefits. This Friday, in fact, I'm covering the movie Halloween, the 1978 one. So look for that over on patreon.com/John Helps You Write Better. And remember, every day you can get me in your ears talking to you about writing things and encouragement and all stuff like that. Go to wherever you get your podcast and go search for John Helps You Write Better. It will absolutely put a ton of stuff in your ears. It's on Spotify, it's on Google, it's on Amazon, it's on Apple, it's everywhere you get a podcast, and even a few places you haven't heard of before. And of course, I want to give the hugest of thanks to everybody out there, the comrades, my friends, the family, the lovers, the people, everybody, all power to all people. I hope you do well. I hope you take care of yourselves. Drink a glass of water, celebrate, relax, feel good, continue making good art, and I will talk to you in the very, very near future. The next time I'm here, by the way, just out of curiosity, it'll be November. It'll be November the 2nd. Whew. All right. So until then, I love you. I'll talk to you soon. Have a good night. See ya!